Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. This season, we are talking with leaders inside organizations focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're talking with them about best practices and proven tools for positive change. We are also sharing vignettes from our new book, Allyship in Action, to help leaders take real, tangible action on DEI right away. This work is important because all humans need to feel seen, heard, and belonging in the workplace. Vulnerability. If this is a word that's hard to say out loud or makes you cringe or increases your blood pressure a little bit, you're not alone. And as we've been navigating kind of a short mini series on our new book, Allyship in Action, vulnerability and the subject we covered last week, empathy, go hand in hand. And again, have to call out Brene Brown and her set of tools. She is an expert on these subjects. But we're going to apply some of her work as well as the work of other thought leaders in this space through the lens of inclusion. So specifically, how does vulnerability work with being inclusive in our home spaces, our workspaces, and just really all spaces of our lives as we've tried to really put together that action plan with our new book, Allyship in Action, 10 Strategies to Live Inclusively. So the third strategy is vulnerability. And it's not meant to be easy. Okay, vulnerability is like a muscle. The more you use it, the better you get. No one's born with a finite amount of empathy or vulnerability. It's something you got to practice. It's like a workout routine. The first time it's hard and it gets easier. So it's hard because human beings are wired for connection. We desperately want to fit in. And a lot of times that means social acceptance. So when we show vulnerability, meaning we're not perfect, we have made mistakes, we have weaknesses, we don't know everything, that feels deeply uncomfortable because we might be rejected by the very group of which we desperately want to be a part of, whether that's our family, whether that's our friend circles, our colleagues. And all that fear might be kicking around in the back of your brain, preventing you from admitting a mistake or sharing a weakness or saying, I don't know. Those behaviors are deeply important because that's what helps us connect. And so it's a little counterintuitive that our very fear of not being vulnerable is the way to create connection. So I invite you to reflect on your comfort level with vulnerability. If you had to kind of 1 to 10 point scale it, where would you put yourself? I would say for me, my corporate experience days, back to my previous life, not so comfortable, right? I was very fearful of admitting a mistake or a weakness. Often a lot of the constructive feedback I got in corporate settings was, Julie, you don't wait to really think about what the problem is. You're just like, I got it. I'm on it. Let's just wash it away. Let's just kick the can. And that conflict aversion, that people pleasing often prevented me from real vulnerability. Now, what I found in getting immersed in this DEI work, personally and professionally, absolutely, I am going to make mistakes. Mistakes are a part of any learning process, especially in an evolving world like inclusion. So it's the bumble and the stumble, and it's being okay with that's a part of the journey. Actually, I would argue if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not doing it authentically. There's no one right way to do this by any means. But if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not taking enough risks. And so I'll just share, some of the mistakes I've made. Some of the critical feedback I've received actually very recently has been, Julie, you're very focused on Black culture and the Black community with Black History Month, etc., that just passed. And a Latina woman had shared, I'd love for you to focus more on people like me and the Latinx community. And I thought, well, shoot, what a mess. What a mess. Why is it that I'm so focused, or I appear to be so focused on the Black experience in the workplace. And a lot of it's a product of my curiosity from the summer of 2020. And my curiosity started well before then, but a very deep plunge into anti-racism work and content, and continue to do unpacking racism through the lens of the Black experience, because it's a very unique and troubling past that, as I've learned more about it, I've wanted others to learn more about. So lesson learned here is, thanks for the feedback. I'm going to try to get better, right? And that's the only response I could write at the point, because I don't have anything planned specifically for Latinx. Now, if I think about that, there is opportunities to celebrate holidays, get to know cultural experience, better understand movies and books from the Latinx community. And by the way, the term Latinx, I'm not even sure if is 100% right. That's the term I've been educated on using, but that's a fluid term that very well may change, because that's a very, very broad term to describe a huge portion of folks that may not identify with that term. So all this to say this, and sharing that story, much like I share a lot of stories in the book, Allyship in Action, is we learn from story, and especially story about vulnerability. A time when you bumbled and stumbled, a time when you didn't get it right, a time when you failed, a time when you had to unlearn something you thought to be true. So what I'd encourage you to do is reflect on your own personal experiences. How comfortable do you feel with vulnerability? Kind of 1 to 10 point scale it. No right or wrong answer. Just know your starting point. Understand the impact of story, okay, and our desire to fit in as a social species. So just process that and think about how you could use stories around vulnerability to invite others to be vulnerable with you. I think that's especially important as a caregiver in all aspects of our life as well. We don't have to be perfect. We actually enjoy being with people that show their imperfections, that are real humans, because it's genuine, it's authentic. It's also not easy. And the last tool I'd leave you with that we share more in the book are taking an inventory of what we call your shame triggers. And what prevents us from being vulnerable, as Brene Brown says, is shame. So what are your sources of shame? She has found in her research that the number one shame trigger in the workplace is irrelevance, the fear of being irrelevant. Wow, right? But for a lot of white people, it might be someone calling you a racist, or saying something you said was racist. Or it could be making a mistake, not having the answers, being wrong. Just this real reckoning with discomfort, or this lack of a clear path forward, or perhaps unexpectedly offending somebody and having good intentions and not understanding the impact of your words or actions. So surprises are very vulnerable. So reflect on your own comfort level, the connection to shame, and just think about, how could I flex this muscle a little bit more? How could I ask for feedback, admit a mistake, say I don't know, practice not being perfect, letting go of this need to be all things to all people, as I know a lot of women struggle with, myself included. The power of that, of owning, here's where shame could show up for me, and here's how I'm going to use vulnerability as a tool to overcome it as an ally, is incredibly empowering, not just to you, but to everyone around you, because we're modeling our actions through our actions every day. What we expect from other people, especially the little people around us, are taking note and mirroring and matching what we do. So if you like this content, again, we're just doing some mini doses from Allyship in Action, the book. We also have a companion activity guide that has in-depth tools and real talk track conversations, activities, hands-on activities you can do with your family, your coworkers, just anyone personally or professionally in your life. Because real allies take action. They don't sit on the sidelines. They don't hide behind the books and the podcast. They do things. They do hard things. They do vulnerable things. So thanks so much. Stay tuned. We'll dive into the next strategy next week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Allies are necessary for positive change. If you are on the journey to becoming an ally, we invite you to participate in our brand new Lead Like an Ally online program, or get a copy of our new book, Allyship in Action, available on Amazon. Both are helpful tools that meet leaders where they're at and help provide tools for professional and personal settings. Head over to nextpivotpoint.com to get started today.